Hello my friends, and welcome to the late winter kitchen. I thought it would be fun today for us to kind of peek into the root cellar and take stock of what we still have preserved from last year's harvest. I kind of wanted to show you what it looks like at this stage in the year, because long gone are the beautiful, fresh, bountiful baskets of the garden, and instead, this is what we have this time of year. I'm glad that we still have as much as we do. From all the old homesteading books that I've read, late winter and really early spring are the times when homesteads would go through the most difficult time, because of course your larder is full when winter starts, and then you're really anticipating the next harvest, which at least in our zone, which is 7B, it's not going to be here for a little while. And even when it does come, it's mostly spinaches and radish and lettuces and those kinds of things, which are lovely, but certainly aren't going to keep you alive and sustain a whole family. So let's take stock of what we still have, because this is really going to change what we decide to grow in the garden this year, what we need more of, what we need less of, and so on. Maybe we'll just work this way. So this is all of the garlic that I have left. I typically grow a hardneck storage variety. So what hardneck means is that the stem, which is hard, goes all the way down. Let me show you what that looks like. There's also soft neck varieties. So instead of big cloves all around a central neck, you get cloves that get smaller and smaller all the way towards the inside. So these ones just have big old cloves all the way around this central neck. I don't know exactly which variety this is. I plant a bunch of different varieties. Music is a main storage crop that I grow. So you can see this had 4 large cloves around this hard neck. Almost every variety I grow is hardneck. That's just kind of the way it works out in my garden. I also get really tired of peeling teeny tiny little garlic cloves. So I need to grow more garlic. I already planted it last fall and kind of late winter here. Oh, there's a spider on there. Gross. I hate those. They scare me when they come out like that. I think I planted 2 or 3 more pounds of garlic than I did last year. So I don't know exactly how much that will yield. But last year I planted 3 pounds. This year I planted 6 pounds. So we doubled up on our garlic harvest. We use, of course, the green garlic scapes to make a green garlic salt. And then, of course, we use the garlic all year long. So I've been sort of rationing, knowing that we're not going to pull our garlic out till late June or late July. This has to last us until then. So more garlic. So an easy way to tell if your garlic has kind of gone off is just to pinch it. And if it's nice and firm like this one, you're good. If it's squishy, you just take it out. Usually just 1 or 2 cloves will go. I don't think I have any like that right now, but you'll feel them. They just kind of feel hollow, easy enough to sort through. Okay, another crop that we sort of stocked up on last year was these really beautiful walnuts. I have some walnut trees planted on our property, but they are not big enough to harvest anything from yet. So we have about 30 pounds more walnuts downstairs that we still need to shell. Of course, that makes a huge mess and takes a lot of time, but the taste is really good. Again, you can kind of tell when the walnuts have started to go off, because they'll get really kind of black and weird. And when you crack them open, the flesh just looks kind of dried and shrunken up. Let me show you a really easy way to crack this just for fun. So when we sit down to crack these as family, it's kind of like an oyster and put it in your hand, because they do slip. There's 2 ends to a walnut. One's kind of pointy, and then one's where it attaches to the tree. It's a little bit more sunken in. It's kind of like a belly button. It's kind of soft, so all you got to do is put your knife tip in there and twist it, and it'll crack your walnut perfectly in half. And then you can take these beautiful fat pieces out. Usually I have my kids just hammer slightly on one end. But if it's gone bad, it just looks unappetizing. It can kind of smell a little sour, shrunken up, but these look great. We still have about 30 pounds of those to work through, so that's beautiful. Great sustenance, great storage food. I counted, we have 24 more jars of jam left, which kind of sounds like a lot, but my kids can eat like 2 of these easy if I make waffles or pancakes or something. So the favorites this year were peach and blackberry, so apparently I need to be making more of those. Rhubarb, it's my personal favorite, not the kids'. So we still have some jams and jellies. Tomato jam is another real favorite of my family's. I'll put the recipe for my tomato jam recipe underneath this video. But we should be able to make it until we start having spring strawberries and spring rhubarb coming out of the garden. So that's good. Jam was almost right on. You guys, I don't know what to do about, I still have 24 butternut squashes. And I know squash is so good for you. I know it's a beautiful vegetable. I know that it's a great storage crop. I know all these things to be true, and my family does not like it. They just do not like it. The one way that they'll eat it is if I puree it and put it in like a homemade tortellini or ravioli, or if I make some sort of like a potager blended vegetable soup out of it. They will eat it like that, but on the whole, just not anybody's favorite. And I'm kind of trying to decide in the garden this year if I want to grow a bunch of squash and force them to eat it and train their taste buds, or if I just need to submit to the fact that they don't love squash. I mean, these ones are, again, you can tell it's kind of getting a little wrinkly. I mean, these were pulled out of the garden in September, so that's 5 months ago. So these have been in storage for quite a long time. I don't know. That's undetermined on that one.
I would like to invite you to join the Elliott Homestead cooking community at cook.theelliottHomestead.com. This is for home cooks out there who would love some new inspiration, ideas, and motivation to get going in the kitchen. Each month, I create 5 brand new recipes inspired by what is in season around our farm. But don't worry, you don't have to have a farm to enjoy this beautiful food. You can have these recipes delivered to you digitally or physically if you live within the United States. Recipes will range from entrees to side dishes to desserts, breads, vegetables, salads, everything in between. Then I'll guide you through the recipes with a long, in-depth cooking video, showing you new skills and encouraging you as you give these recipes a try in your own kitchen, whether you're cooking for yourself or you're cooking for a crowd. The Elliott Homestead cooking community is here to inspire and nourish your family. We're going to teach you to bake, to use sourdough, to try new ingredients, to really fall in love with good food again. Visit cook.theelliottHomestead.com for more information.
Okay, counted in my root cellar, I have 6-gallon jars still of kimchi. So I make this with like a Chinese cabbage or a Napa cabbage, and it's beautiful, it's delicious. We just still have 6-gallon jars of it, which means I can probably grow less of the Napa cabbage in my garden this year, which is great news. We'll probably only need maybe another 6 gallons to sort of top up our normal supply so that we can have about a dozen or 15 gallons of kimchi in the fridge is usually what I aim for. This is naturally fermented, so it's spicy, and then I just use salt and water to ferment it. So it'll last in storage for a very, very long time. And it's delicious. My kids love it. This is my last jar of chilies, and this was my first year of preserving them this way. So these are just kind of like a red Thai spicy chili, really generic from the garden. And I literally just put these in a gallon jar with some garlic. And then I filled it halfway up with vinegar and the other half with water. And then I stuck it right in the fridge. That's all I did. And these are so cool. We've been using them like crazy because you can pull it out. Obviously, it has a little bit of a vinegar flavor. But if you're going to add chili to something, typically a teeny bit of vinegar is no big deal to add to it, and you can just chop it just like normal. So this has been a really versatile way, much better than dried, I find. Just the texture is more enjoyable, the flavor is more pungent. So I will be making a lot more of those next year. What I won't be growing as much of in the garden is jalapenos. I just cannot eat them. They are too spicy for me. I just don't have it in my blood to be able to consume spicy food like that. I grew so many jalapenos. I preserved so many jalapenos. These ones are in the same vinegar water solution. I also fermented a bunch, so I have a bunch of sliced jalapenos in the cold room that have been fermented with salt and water. Everything held great. Everything tastes delicious. I just cannot eat them. Nobody in my family can really eat enough of them to warrant growing a huge amount. So maybe 1 jalapeno plant is all we need, because that's probably going to take us like 5 years to get through that jar. I keep giving them to my brother-in-law because he loves spicy food. So every time he comes to visit, I'm like, here, take some jalapenos back with you. The one thing I can never grow enough of, this is our very last jar, is pickles. So I need to make sure that I get this crop right this year. These are my barrel fermented pickles. We did a video on that years ago if you want to check it out. There's also, I'll put a link below the video to a blog post that details how we do this. But this again is just water, salt, fermentation. So they are alive with all kinds of beneficial bacteria, great for your gut. My kids love these. I really feel like I hit this on the nose this year because the ticket is really to shove your jars full of oak leaves or grape leaves, both of which have an element to them that keeps the pickles really crisp. This was a great year for pickles. I find that I like them a lot more in the half-gallon size jars, just the way that they hold, how many it holds and all that. So that was a great crop. More pickles always, my kids say. We have been eating a ton of sweet potatoes and we have 5 pounds left. So I am tripling our sweet potato crop this year because we could have eaten them a lot more. I kind of tried to ration them to get them to last through the winter. But whereas potatoes have always been a bit of a tricky crop to grow where we are because it's just so hot in the summertime, the sweet potatoes did awesome with almost no care whatsoever. So you just plant a sweet potato slip and you literally just kind of mound up around it, and then I didn't touch them again until I harvested them in the fall. So this was a really wonderful crop. We had a couple that molded, but usually it's because they were damaged and some of the flesh of the potato was exposed. So super easy to spot those, clean them out, no big deal. That was a great crop. This was actually our first year growing sweet potatoes, so I'm happy with that. Okay, a couple years ago, we also did a video on echinacea tincture. I want you to check that out. This is a great sort of medicinal herb to have on hand. So I make a jar every single year, and that's enough to supply us. This was last year's jar, so it's really changing, as it leaks, really changing colors and such now. You can see we've used a little bit of it, but luckily we haven't had to use it that much. We've had a good, healthy winter for the most part. So that is still in there, and I always, always, always try to have some on hand. I'll post a link to that video down below as well. This is our very last cabbage, and I wanted to show you this because I want to show you how good it does not look. This was pulled out of the garden, I believe in the beginning of July. So this has been in cold storage for a long time. Don't worry about what's dripping, it's just some water. But this is fine. I just want to show you that when you store cabbages long term, this is what they look like. The outside sort of starts to get all weird and not appetizing looking. But if you peel back the outer layers, it's good to know, like, this is actually what they do for your cabbages in the store too. You just don't see this part of the process. But if you peel back just a few of the outer layers, you can see all of a sudden, it just kind of looks like a normal cabbage, doesn't it? And it eats like a normal cabbage. You'll find that your cabbages get maybe a little bit more bitter at this stage in the year, just as the sugars begin to dissolve a bit and fade, which inevitably happens anytime you pick a vegetable. Look at that, perfect cabbage. So that looks pretty, that looks appetizing now. It's important to remember that that is what's underneath that little crusty shell. One cabbage is all that's left. So probably we should grow a few more cabbages, although, it's pretty spot on considering once spinach and arugula and lettuces start coming out of the garden, we don't want to eat cabbage anymore. We're done with that. We won't eat that again until we harvest it. All right, let's take stock of our sun-dried tomatoes. This is a beautiful way to preserve your summer tomatoes. Literally just dehydrated tomatoes packed in olive oil. I still have about 6 of these, which is great. Delicious on pizzas or flatbreads, focaccias, anything like that. So that's good. Happy to have those. And just like our kimchi, actually, we have 6 gallons left of sauerkraut. So this is just a really traditional shredded cabbage, preserved with salt and water, fermented, absolutely beautiful. You can see at this stage of storage, it kind of starts to shrink down a little bit and the moisture level sort of shrinks down, but that's totally fine. If you open it up, it's still right as rain on the inside and it smells delicious. We eat a ton of sauerkraut. I just also make a ton of sauerkraut. So having 6 gallons on hand is still fine by me. I think typically we grow around 50 heads of cabbage every year just for our sauerkraut. Usually we don't end up harvesting quite that many just because of pests and stuff, but a huge storage crop for us. So again, super happy to have that on hand. Probably one of our main storage crops that we cannot do without would be our onions. This is a yellow of Parma. storage onion. And I braid them like this. Also done a video on that. I'll tag that below the video. But these still look great. I haven't had nearly any, I haven't really had any problems at all with onions sprouting. So sometimes when you keep them, they get exposed to too much sunlight, or if it's too warm where you store them, then what'll happen is the onions will just start to sprout. They'll start to send up those little green shoots. You can cut those off and use those just like you would scallions, which is a great way to use them. But what happens is the bulb inevitably just sort of goes rotten because it put all its energy into that sprout. We haven't had that happen this year, but I do keep my eye open for it. So we keep all of our onion braids down in our root cellar underneath our kitchen. So when I walk by them throughout the winter, I'll take down any that start to sprout. Or if you really smell like this does not smell at all. If you start to smell onion, that means you have an onion going off. It just happens. All you have to do is kind of go, give them a little squeeze, and if you feel a soft one, just tug it out of the braid. Not a big deal. We have 7 more braids left, which is making me a little nervous, but again, I'm happy to have that many left because we'll be into spring onions pretty quick. So that should be enough. I would kind of bring one of these up. I hang them up here on the wall and just cook from it. This will probably last our family maybe about 10 days. That's about how many onions that we use, but we cook a lot here. You might not go through them as quickly. 7 braids left, half yellow, half purple. So on the whole, I'm really happy with how that all worked out. Okay, just a couple more crops left. These ones look atrocious. These are our leeks, a great storage crop. We keep these in our cold room, in our refrigerator that we have downstairs. Again, they look terrible, and this isn't really the time of year to use the greens because everything sort of is kind of coming inward. It's using its energy just to try to stay. So, on the whole, this looks pretty terrible. But what you can do, same as the cabbage, is just peel back those outer layers of oldness, and you're left with, obviously you're going to cut the root off. I would cut this off, and you're left with a really beautiful leek. So these are a storage leek. I have this many left, which means I need to use them up. Primarily, you could use them in place of an onion in almost any recipe. You could make a really beautiful leek and potato soup. Lots of options there. Glad to have that harvest. And then last but not least is our potatoes, my sweet potatoes. I'm happy in the sense that this is the first year that we are still eating from our potatoes at this stage of the year. The downside is that this is what happens to potatoes. So this is going to happen even if you grow storage potatoes. Inevitably, it's going to start to sprout unless you treat it, which is, treat it chemically, like a lot of potatoes you get in the store are treated chemically to keep them from doing this. The potato just wants to carry on. So you could plant this in your garden and use it for your potato crop next year. It just doesn't make it as pleasant to eat because just like the onion, when a potato puts its energy into these sprouts, it takes the energy away from the potato. So the potato kind of ends up shriveled and not nearly as pleasant to eat. So what I find myself doing now, this is our last bin of potatoes, as you can see here. Lots of sprouting going on. Hold this up here. Lots of sprouting and lots of little potatoes. So when we were harvesting potatoes, you don't want to leave any potatoes behind in your garden because they will grow into potatoes next year. So you want to try and get them all out. But what that means is you end up pulling out these like teeny little guys, which still, if you put that in a stew or something, that's great. But what I find myself doing is really having to sort through at this point and pull out the ones that we actually want to eat versus the ones that are sprouted and kind of gross and shriveled and not really ones that we want to eat. So, we still have a couple good ones. That's a nice firm potato. A couple of good size, weird shape. But, there's, for every one of those, there's like one of these. You're just not going to eat that anymore. So what I probably should do is just sort through these, pull aside the ones that are no good for eating anymore, and just keep a smaller basket right here in the kitchen to eat up as quickly as possible. Because I think these guys have about hit their mark in terms of storage capacity. So taking all of this into account, I'm really proud of how far we've come. You know, neither Stuart or I grew up knowing how to do any of this. This is all stuff that we've kind of learned on the fly. We've had to make a ton of mistakes. We've had to have a lot of crop failures, a lot of preserving failures to get to this point. So on the whole, I'm really happy with how much we have left in our food storage. I'm also really anxious for the season ahead and knowing that we're going to get all kinds of beautiful new fresh produce out of the market garden this year. I hope that taking a peek into our late winter root cellar has encouraged you in your preserving journey and of course encouraged you to get out, plant some amazing produce in your own garden this coming season.